Alright, so what is up, everyone? I just finished a game that, needless to say, has been one of the most talked about games in quite a long time. They've announced it probably 2 years before the game ever came out, and it was just highly anticipated as the last, probably one of the last best-selling hits of the Wii before it goes obsolete when the Wii U comes out. And the game that I am talking about is going to be Twilight Princess, or Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And let me just tell you that this game is not a bad game. I'm going to tell you that right now. It's a really, really good, well done game, but I've got to give my honest review on it. And so before I go ranting and raving, I just got to tell you it's a good game, so don't knock it for that. It's just, there's just a couple things wrong with it that I felt were probably things that they could have fixed. So first of all, let me tell you about the game. Skyward Sword is set to be probably the first game in the Zelda timeline. Sometimes it's really hard to place where these games go, but the producers of the game have said this is definitely going to be the first game in the Zelda timeline. So you play as Link, obviously, and you start off in this island in the sky that they call Skyloft, and from there your childhood friend Zelda ends up being thrown off this island and landing on the surface beneath the clouds that is pretty much just a myth or a legend to the people of Skyloft. They don't know if a surface actually exists because of the cloud cover. So you, being the hero obviously, have to go beneath the clouds and find this surface and hopefully find Zelda and rescue her if need be. You are given help by a strange presence that lies within the sword that you get before you set off to the ground. It's called the Goddess Sword, and I guess kind of like a fairy type deity that lives inside the sword is called Fee, and she's kind of your guide along this journey. And she pops up from time to time with relevant information or non-relevant information given the circumstances, and ends up pretty much helping you along the way. So you head off below the surface in search of Zelda and find this expansive land that you will have to travel along until you finally reach Zelda. And I'm not going to give away too much of the plot, but that's the main gist. Go save Zelda, save the world. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty straightforward Zelda game. So, what did I like about the game? I really liked the storyline. The storyline was really good. The fact that they actually made it the first Zelda game in the entire Zelda timeline, and then have it tie to other games, that was what I thought was really cool. When you connect a game like this to other ones that have come out previously, that's probably the best part of this game, is just the story and linking it to other games that have come out previously. The music was also extremely good. Maybe not for like the main game, because they actually came up with a new theme. It wasn't an old recycled theme, it was actually a new theme for this game. And they played that for most of it, but towards the end of the game, when you start realizing the connections between this one and other games like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess and stuff like that, you finally realize, you finally get to hear some of that more classic Zelda themes. I also like the use of color in this game. I mean, it's not the same kind of graphic style that they had in like Twilight Princess. It's a lot closer to Wind Waker, but they were able to do it without making it as childish as Wind Waker, you know? They use the color really well in the fact that it doesn't look too childish. It actually still looks fairly decent, but they're able to use the color to suit that purpose. The next thing I want to talk about is the length of the game. It's almost the perfect length, I'd like to say, because it's long enough where you get your money's worth out of the game, but it's not too long that you're just saying by the end, oh god, I just want to get this over with. And I mean, towards the end of the game, yeah, I was rushing to get it done, but that's more because I didn't want it to be over 200 parts on my YouTube page and having to make another playlist for it. I really enjoyed the length of the game. I thought that, you know, it was just long enough for me to get my money's worth and not long enough to make it just, like, irritatingly long, you know. I mean, a game like this, I didn't do everything, obviously. There were a lot of side missions that I wasn't able to complete. But even with those side missions, it wouldn't have been too bad. One of the last things I want to talk about with what I liked about the game was motion controls. And I know what you're saying, the motion controls are really frustrating and stuff like that, but they actually got it right in this game. You know, most of the time, you'll do something with the motion controls and it'll actually do what you want it to. I like the fact that you could use the Wii Remote, and I'm going to use it actually real quick here. I like the fact that you use the Wii Remote and you can slash it vertically and you can slash it horizontally, and most of the time that would actually work, and it would sense which one you're doing. I like the fact that you could roll bombs, and most of the time that would work. And a lot of, you know, the Skyward strikes are really cool. You could hold the Wii Remote up and then let loose you know, some kind of like sword projectile. It was pretty cool. But that also leads me into what I didn't like about this game, motion controls, because it was so frustrating sometimes when, you know, you lose calibration and all of a sudden, you know, you're trying to aim your arrows and you're pointing at the screen and it just keeps on turning around like you're pointing over here or something like that. And I mean, what I liked about the development of the motion controls is that they knew that your Wii Remote was going to lose calibration, so they added the, you know, the down key, so that you could recenter the controls if you needed to, and most of the time that fixed it. But at the very end of the game, I mean, you saw when I was fighting the final boss that when you lose calibration, sometimes it's really hard to get it back. And I kept on trying to charge my sword with a Skyward Strike, and it just would not work. It would not work. I was holding my controller up, I was going like this, and waving it around and stuff like that, and it just wouldn't work. And I actually had to point it at the screen, and the game would then hold the sword up and charge it, but I was pointing at the screen. The calibration was way off, and there was no down control to use to recalibrate it. So sometimes things like that were really, really annoying and really frustrating. And like I said, it only worked most of the time. Sometimes you try to roll a bomb, and he'd, like, you know, hold it up in the air and like wave it around, and then it would explode in his face. And it was really, really annoying. So, motion controls got kind of frustrating in this game and kind of old. I wish that the motion controls would actually have finally gotten developed enough to actually be perfect. You know, I wish that they could have gotten the motion controls to work all the time, 100%, without any fail. Or maybe if it failed, just like once every, you know, 10 hours or something like that of gameplay. You know, it's just, I wish they could have done better with the motion controls. The next thing I want to talk about is the repetitiveness of the game. There are 3 locations that you go to throughout the entire game. There's a forest, there's a volcano, and there's a desert. And you go back to those same 3 locations 3 different times. There's no new places. Once you discover them for the first time, you keep on going back and back and back, again and again and again, for the entire game. There's just 3 locations. Since when, in any Zelda game, has there only been 3 locales to explore? Granted, there's also Skyloft, that kind of counts as a 4th, like, hub. to get everywhere. And that actually leads me into flying as well, because the flying in this game got so repetitive as well. I mean, yeah, it's cool at the very beginning when you're flying around and you're able to do this, but towards the end of the game, when you're doing it all the time to go back and forth to these damn locales, and it takes like 5 minutes to get from one location to the other, I mean, come on. Even Ocarina of Time had fast travel where you could play the ocarina and then, you know, teleport yourself to some other, you know, location. It's just that was one thing that they did really poorly, is just, you can fly if you want to and fly to discover new places, but they should have had some kind of fast travel mechanism in this game, and they just didn't. You know, that was really poorly designed on their part. And the boss fights are another thing I want to talk about. They're not necessarily repetitive. The bosses of each temple were varied greatly, and you usually had to find it, you know, what their pattern was, and kill them based on whatever they were doing. But the imprisoned, when you fought the imprisoned, you had to fight the same exact battle 3 times during the game, and almost a 4th time at the end there. I mean, I'm just glad that, you know, you didn't have to fight him again at the end. 3 different times for the same exact boss battle is just ridiculous. And I think the last thing I want to talk about with what I didn't like about the game was just the lack of an open world. I mean, when you're thinking about Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, what they all had in common was a vast open world where you could walk to these different locations, you know, on the ground through Hyrule Field. It was you know, one of the best parts about the game, because as you're walking you can find these little side caves, these little missions, these, you know, random occurrences. There's pieces of heart hidden all over the fucking place, and they just didn't have that in this game. You couldn't get from one location to another. You had to fly from one location to another. And I feel like you lost something out of this game because you didn't have that open world feeling. You know, you could only go to these 3 locations, and you couldn't get to another. You couldn't get to one from another. And I thought that was one thing that I really enjoyed about the other Zelda games, is that, you know, I can get from here to here, and I can do all these things along the way. No, you can't do that. So, what is my final word on this game? What is my score that I give this game? When you think about Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, they're like a 10 and a 9.5 respectively. This game pales in comparison to those games. I don't even feel that I can even give this an 8, just because of how frustrating the motion controls were, how repetitive the gameplay was, and just how boring it was without an open world. Granted, I love the story and the length of the game, but that's just not enough. So I give Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword a 7.5. It just isn't quite worthy of an 8, which for me is a excellent game, and it just falls short of that title, I think. So Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, a 7.5, and that is my final word.